A fractured man, swallowed by darkness, struggles through a world stained with crime and corruption. Haunted by loyalty, torn by ambition, he transforms from a desperate lawyer into a merciless force. In this relentless fight for power and survival, he loses himself in everything he once held dear. I lived on the edge of failure for so long I thought it was normal. Every day felt like a negotiation between survival and surrender. I was a lawyer, technically, but not the kind who stood in polished courtrooms or dealt with influential clients. I defended people no one else would touch: petty thieves, conmen, the forgotten, and the damned. My office was small, my reputation smaller. What little I earned barely kept my half-brother and me afloat. Beomje has always been different. He didn't waste time trying to play by rules written by people who despised us. He lived in shortcuts, in back alleys, and whispered names. He made deals, moved things, and answered people who didn't have business cards. We were brothers, but we stood on opposite sides of the same cracked street. He hustled in the shadows, I floundered in daylight. But I envied him sometimes. He wasn't afraid of the world like I was. He didn't tremble under its weight. He bent with it, flowing through it. And eventually it was through him that the door opened. It started with the name So Do-young, a former athlete, a golden boy once celebrated by the nation, now reduced to myth and whispers. But myths survive for a reason, and he wasn't dead. He had turned his fame into fear. His bat was replaced by a blade, and people still flinched when they heard he was coming. He needed a lawyer. No one wanted the job. Beomje brought the case to me. I should have said no. Everything in me screamed against it. But my debt-ridden life didn't leave room for dignity. I needed the money, needed the boost, needed something to shatter the gray routine of losing. So I said yes. Meeting Do-young was like standing in front of a silent but seething storm. He didn't speak much, but he didn't have to. His presence rearranged the air around him. I did my job. I prepared his defense, gathered evidence, and manipulated loopholes. I didn't ask questions, and I didn't want answers. I just worked. But somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending I didn't care. I started watching him not out of fear, but fascination. He moved with purpose, without hesitation. He didn't apologize. He didn't seek approval. He demanded, and the world obeyed. I started thinking about all the times I had compromised, stepped back, and bent over. I wondered what it would feel like to stop being afraid. I won his case, or maybe he let me win it. After that, I became more than a lawyer. I started handling arrangements for him, favors, errands, meetings where legal lines blurred. At first, I felt disgusted with myself, but that faded quickly. Each task brought rewards, money, respect, and silence when I walked into rooms. I told myself it was temporary, but in truth, I had started tasting something addictive. My world changed. My cheap suits were replaced with tailored ones. I moved with more confidence and spoke with more weight. I made people uncomfortable, and I liked it. The law had always felt like a cage to me, something that bound and gagged. But outside it, I was free. And Do-young noticed. He saw something in me, something I hadn't seen in myself. Or maybe he put it there. We grew closer, though that word barely fits. He wasn't a friend. He wasn't a mentor. He was a current, and I was learning to swim with it. He let me in deeper into his operations, his secrets, and his cruelty. I saw what power looked like when stripped of conscience. I saw what fear could build, and I learned quickly. Beomje watched me change. At first, he smiled, proud that I was rising. He believed I was finally earning respect. But the smile faded when he saw what I was becoming. I started making choices without consulting him, cutting deals that put him at risk. I stopped being his brother and started acting like a superior. I didn't care. I told myself he'd understand. The work got darker. I buried evidence, threatened people, and protected murderers. I helped destroy lives with a signature, and with each choice I became less and less like the man I had been. But I couldn't stop. I didn't want to. The taste of power is sharper than hunger. I began to understand that morality was a tool useful when needed, disposable when inconvenient. I started commanding fear. People who once ignored me now waited for my word. Even within Do-young's circle, I rose fast. I wasn't just an accessory anymore, I was an architect. I knew who needed to be silenced, who could be bought, and who would break. I used to tremble in courtrooms. Now others trembled in my presence. But I also saw the cost. I felt the distance growing between me and the world I used to know. My reflection became unfamiliar. The man in the mirror didn't flinch, didn't ask questions, and didn't carry guilt. He looked back with cold, quiet certainty. And he liked what he saw. I told myself I was surviving, but deep down I knew I had crossed a threshold. This wasn't survival anymore. This was a transformation. I was no longer a man trying to make it. I was becoming something else entirely. And I wasn't sure I wanted to go back. The deeper I sunk into this life, the more I realized that power was a double-edged blade. It gave, but it also demanded. Du Young wasn't a man to share the throne willingly, and soon the thin thread that bound us began to fray. Our alliance was built on mutual benefit, but beneath that was a simmering tension. Who would dominate? Who would fall first? I had tasted authority, and there was no going back. Yet I also understood that those who rise fast often fall faster. Every move I made was watched, every whisper around me was a threat. The criminal world doesn't forgive ambition, it devours it. I had to be sharper, colder, and more ruthless than before. My relationship with Beomjae fractured under the weight of my choices. He was my brother, but I had turned into a stranger. I dragged him into dangerous gambits and convinced him to trust me blindly while I kept secrets. I saw the hurt in his eyes, the disappointment, the betrayal, but I pushed it away. I told myself he was weak, that he couldn't understand the demands of power. I told myself anything but the truth. I was afraid of losing control. The streets we walked weren't forgiving. The alliances I forged came with invisible chains. Friends turned to enemies overnight. Promises were broken in the blink of an eye. The law I once upheld became a joke, a mask worn to hide the corruption underneath. I wasn't above the law. I was beneath it, weaving through its cracks like a predator. The things I did, I cannot deny them, and I cannot excuse them. I silenced witnesses, corrupted officials, and orchestrated violence. I crossed lines I once swore I never would. Each act chipped away the last fragments of my old self. What remained was a man ruled by ambition, fear, and a relentless hunger for survival. Du Young and I spiraled into a dangerous dance, each testing the other's limits, each waiting for a misstep. He was unpredictable, violent, and paranoid. I learned to anticipate his moods and his moves, but I also realized he saw me as a rival, not an ally. That realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. The final fractures came when I had to choose between loyalty and self-preservation. Du Young made his moves silent, precise, and brutal. I had to act quickly and decisively. I severed ties that once seemed unbreakable and burned bridges I once thought permanent. The aftermath left nothing but ruins, broken friendships, shattered trust, and a kingdom built on sand. Yet even as I stood among the wreckage, I felt no regret. I was no longer the man who hesitated. I was a force, a shadow moving through the city's underbelly, a master of a dangerous game. The cost was immense, but the power was intoxicating. I looked at Beomjae one last time, not with anger or guilt, but with a cold acknowledgement of what I had become. I had lost him, just as I lost myself. The brother I once knew was gone, swallowed by a world neither of us could control. In the quiet moments between chaos, I sometimes remembered who I was before the timid lawyer, the struggling brother. But those memories were ghosts, fading with each passing day. They belonged to another life, another man. Now, I am a creature of this dark world. The law, justice, and family, they are words from a distant past. I am power and fear wrapped in a suit. I am the man no one dares cross, and I have no intention of stopping. Because in this world, the only rule is survival, and I have learned to live by it no matter the cost.